Talk the United States of America into spending $350 billion. Okay. To go into a war that couldn't be won. True. Remember when Ukraine was like, let's go into the war?
You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. President Putin and I would talk about Ukraine.
Zelenskyy killed an American journalist.
Now, this is just the latest of Zelensky's actions.
That's good. We're just doing straight Russian propaganda now from the U.S. Department of Intelligence. That's good.
President Trump, in this particular press conference, went extraordinarily hard on Ukraine, much less hard on Russia.
So long live the king from the White House.
Lastly, we have another executive order that President Trump signed that only the president or the attorney general can speak for the United States when stating an opinion as to what the law is.
If half your country wants an authoritarian leader, there's no system that you can design to prevent that from happening. Russian officials were caught off guard by Trump's pivot toward Moscow. Wall Street Journal. After 3 years of American efforts to isolate Russia, U.S. policy took a significant shift toward Moscow in recent days. Russian officials have cheered the change, but even they appear to be caught off guard by the speed of developments. On Tuesday, top-level U.S. and Russian officials met in Saudi Arabia to discuss ways to settle the war in Ukraine and reset Washington's relations with Moscow, just days after President Trump and President Vladimir Putin spoke by phone. Then, a war of words escalated between Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy, with the U.S. president calling him a dictator on Wednesday. I can't believe that they're holding peace talks in Saudi Arabia without Ukraine. Okay.
Where is all the money that's been given? Where is it going? And nobody, I've never seen an accounting of it.
These are just they're just lies. It's okay. We're starting Factorio today. Okay. I'm suspending myself from politics soon. I can't. This is just every day. It's just lie.
Seen it. Look, they have to pay. They have to find out where's the money going to. We have, I believe President Zelenskyy said last week that he doesn't know where half of the money is that we get.
Like, that's not what he said, and that's not what he meant. He's referring to the Lex podcast where I think he was talking about how you have to pay money to like ship stuff or to get like all the money unlocked. He didn't mean that it's like gone. He lost it. That it's like it's just a lie. That's just a lie. It's Russian propaganda. That is.
Gave him. Well, we gave them, I believe, $350 billion, but let's say it's something less than that. But
where did this new $350 billion number come from? I've heard other people cite it now, too. It was actually $350 billion that we gave. It wasn't whatever we thought before. Where did this new $350 billion number come from?
It's a lot. And we have to equalize with Europe because Europe has given us given a very much smaller percentage than that. I think Europe has given $100 billion, and we've given, let's say, 300 plus.
What do you mean, let's say? You're the president of the United States of America. You know you can literally ask your departments for this. You're allowed to ask. Why? You don't have to estimate this at all. You have a whole ass branch of government dedicated to giving you answers like this. Why are you up here guessing like a fucking retard?
And it's more important for them than it is for us. We have an ocean in between, and they don't. But where is all the money that's been given? Where is it going? And I've never seen an accounting of it. We give hundreds of billions of dollars. I don't.
Hundreds of billions of dollars? Is that really what's happening? Okay.
See any accounting. So I want to see peace. Look, you know why I want? Because I don't want all these people killed anymore. I'm looking at people that are being killed.
More Russian talking points. It's just about the meat grinder, the young men dying.
And they're Russian and Ukrainian people, but they're people. Doesn't matter where they're from on the whole planet. And I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way. And President Biden, in all fairness, he doesn't have a clue. When he was so bad for this. He was so bad, so pathetic, so sad. But with all of that being said, look, it is what it is. When I left, there was no chance that this could have happened. But it happened because we had incompetent leadership at many different levels. But when you see what's taken place in Ukraine with millions of people killed, including the soldiers, millions of people killed, a big percentage of their cities knocked down to the ground. I don't know how anybody even lives there. You know, when they say they took a poll and Zelensky's at 4%, who's living there? You know, I mean, it's hard to believe that people live there. Their cities are being knocked down.
Like, does he think like Kyiv is just like a pile of rubble, or that all of Western Ukraine is like Gaza, or? What is Trump's motivation for being Russia's bitch? Nefarious, ultra-charitable take, a wedge between Russia and China thoughts? I can't tell you motivations anymore. It's like things have moved beyond my ability to have like a theory of mind about any of these people. I don't know. My guess is it's just a very naive way of doing isolationism. Like, we don't want to be involved. I don't want the responsibility. I don't want the money. And then just a profound amount of ignorance.
And this is something that would have never happened. And by the way, for 4 years, it didn't happen. It was never going to happen. Go ahead.
Follow-up question. How would you counter the perception, because Russia's pushing for this, obviously, they don't really hold true elections, that would be a capitulation of some sort. How would you guard against potentially Russia installing a puppet government? And then finally, how would that new election have an impact on getting Zelenskyy to sign the rare earth minerals deal?
Look, you have leadership, and I like him personally. He's fine. But I don't care about personally. I care about getting the job done. You have leadership now that's allowed a war to go on that should have never even happened, even without the United States. Look, we had a president who was grossly incompetent. He had no idea what he was doing. He said some very stupid things, like going in for portions and all of the things. He made a lot of bad statements, but he's grossly incompetent, and I think everyone knew that. This is something that should have never happened, would have never happened. And I used to discuss it with Putin. President Putin and I would talk about Ukraine.
Also, it's discussing that the media in the U.S. don't ask the proper questions about these lies. Yeah, to be clear, Trump is one interview away from having the most humiliated interview of all time. If a single person interviewing him would actually sit down and be like, okay, you're saying all of this about how Ukraine started the war and everything. Do you know why Russia invaded Ukraine? Okay, can you tell me why? And when Trump, no, like what happened in 2014? Do you know anything? Like if they were to just sit there and actually force, like he would look like an idiot. He'd walk out after 5 minutes, but like literally anybody in the media could do this, but nobody will. They all want to play ball so that they get him on their shows.
It was the apple of his eye, I will tell you that. But there was never a chance of him going in. And I told him, you better not go in, don't go in, don't go in. And he understood that. He understood it fully. But I'm only interested, I want to see if I can save maybe millions of lives. This could even end up in a World War III. I mean, to be honest with you, you've been hearing now Europe is saying, well, I think we're going to go in and we're going to go. All of a sudden, you're going to end up in World War III over something that should have never happened. And, it's a very sad situation. Yeah, please.
In a court filing, the White House said that Elon Musk is not a Doge employee and has no authority.
I'm just curious, has there been a single time in all of this conflict where Donald Trump has ever blamed Russia for invading? Like a single time? Has he ever done that? They shouldn't have invaded. That was wrong of them or whatever. Like, I don't know.
Authority to make decisions. Can you clarify for us today?
Well, Elon Musk,
that role is
Elon is, to me, a patriot. So, you could call him an employee, you could call him a consultant, you could call him whatever you want. But he's a patriot. I mean, look at the kind of things. I just said, just write it down, just in case that question got asked, right? And which, I'm surprised it took so long, actually. But you know what?
He's a patriot.
You could call him an employee, you could. Elon Musk.
Not a Doge employee and has no authority to make decisions. Can you clarify for us today?
Well, Elon Musk.
That role is
Elon is, to me, a patriot. So, you could call him an employee, you could call him a consultant, you could call him whatever you want. But he's a patriot. I mean,
you could call him like what? Well, no, we're asking what he is. What do you mean? What? Like what?
Look at the kind of things. I just said, just write it down, just in case that question got asked, right? And which, I'm surprised it took so long, actually. But you know what? Ukraine's a bigger deal because people are dying by the thousands a week, thousands. But look at this, from 90 to 99, Social Security, 6,054,000 people. Well, that's okay. Maybe that's possible. 90.
I'm so sorry. Am I not paying attention or what? I don't know. What the fuck is he saying?
That's right. And which, I'm surprised it took so long, actually. But you know what? Ukraine's a bigger deal because people are dying by the thousands a week, thousands. But look at this, from 90 to 99, Social Security, 6,054,000 people. Well, that's okay. Maybe that's possible. 90 to 99, maybe it's possible. It's a lot of people, though, at that. But people that live to 100 to 109.
Oh, he's talking about how, okay.
4,734,000.
Oh, now he's just repeating this bullshit that we already saw. It took like 5 minutes of just reading an OIG SSA report, and we see where these numbers come from, but he doesn't. It's all just lies. All of it's lies.
1,000. Wow, that's a lot. That means.
Why are we talking about Social Security now? That's not. Yeah, and again, that's not even responsive to the question. Like
over 100 years old, they're 4 million people. I don't know too many. I know people that are doing great in their 90s, but not too many people over 100. But over 120, from 120 years old, people that are 120 years old up to 129, 3,472,000 people. Wow. That can't possibly be because the record is like, I think it's one person, a woman, lived to 127, but they have 3,472. Okay, but now we're going really in. People from 130 years old to 139 year old, 3,936,000.
He's really just going to read this stupid fucking chart, huh?
Wow. I wonder if people are getting paid with all this. I mean, are these checks? And that's what we're checking right now.
Checking how? Didn't your OIG do this? Don't you have a department that's doing that? What do you mean that's what we're checking right now?
People from 140 years old to 149 years old, 3,542,000, 140 years old and beyond. Now we're really going because we're looking to break the record by 25 years. People from 150 years old to 159 years old, 1,345,000.
Like
These are
these
in the, by the
reports
way, these are
already
in the computer files.
existed.
This is what they do well. They're super. I asked Elon, who are these Doge people? He said they're super brilliant computer people and they love the country.
They haven't done anything super brilliant, though. We haven't gotten anything. We haven't gotten a single good report. We haven't gotten a single credible allegation. I don't know if we've gotten a single thing yet that wasn't just already publicly available somewhere. Destiny, does it not concern you that there is possible fraud? Wouldn't you want that to be taken care of? So Michael Vander Ploeg in YouTube chat, I wasn't going to say anything, but I got like 450 DMs earlier that said that you like to fuck children. And I'm not saying it happened 100%, but like, it's fair that in YouTube chat that like there's a possibility, I guess, that you do f kids in your free time, right? Like that should be something we think about, right? Like, do you understand how cancerous it is to phrase a thing and ask something like that? Like how unbelievably intellectually bankrupt it is, and how stupid it is to phrase something like, no, do the fucking report before you make the crazy public. It's not even an accusation. They're just declaring that it's happened. No, what a stupid fucking question.
Simple. Wait a minute.
Sorry. Hold on. The worst part is, listen, hold on. Wait. I'm sorry. I blew that guy up. Because that might have been a legitimate question that was asked in good faith. I don't mean to attack your character. I'm just showing that, like, you can theoretically walk into any complex system in the world and not do much research and just say, like, well, this looks weird, and then go and start asking all these questions publicly about it. But, like, there's just something so malevolent about having not done even the basic level of research before asking these questions, right? That's the problem. It's irresponsible, especially when this is the president of the United States. He has access to all this information.
People from 160 years old to 169 years, 121,000. So 160-year-old people, 170 to 179,000, 6,087. But now let's go into the real numbers. From 200 to 209 years old, 879 people. From 210 years old, I haven't met any of them. And if I did, I would bless them. You
know what? I'm surprised this hasn't been his allegation yet. Or maybe people have done it and I just haven't seen it. I'm surprised they're not trying to tie this into the election results from 2020. Like, oh, I know who these 20 million people are. These are all the people that voted for Biden in 2020. Actually, how off was that election? It was only 7 million. Oh, see, so that's more than enough to... They probably... Fuck, I don't know how to do the math on that. If I've got 20 million and I want to give 7 million more to one side than the other, it'd be about like 14 million votes to Biden and then 7 million votes to Trump. So with my 21 million fake dead people, I could get them to vote in that way. I'm surprised they haven't called for that yet, you know? Yeah. It seems like they're not actually trying to find any real fraud. They are simply looking for a piece of information on the surface that might look bad, but on further review probably makes sense. Yeah, they're just looking for stuff to tweet about, basically. Yeah. Do you at all fear that we as liberals are falling into the same trap as the last admin, where we cover everything he does as the end of the world? Obviously, all this shit is bad, but I fear that we're going down the same media rabbit hole that fucked us to begin with. I mean, what are you supposed to say? I mean, like, every single thing is horrible. What are you waiting for? So far, all they did is misread publicly available data. The question we should ask, was it maliciousness or incompetence? I don't know. It could be both. Who the fuck knows? I think it feels like it's kind of depressing, but it feels like the only thing that you can do now is wait for things to start failing. And then when things get fucked, then it's going to be, do people turn back to liberalism or do people become more authoritarian? That's the question at that point. I think the most important thing that the Democrats can do, and it's really cucked and it feels bad, but I think the most important thing that Democrats need to do, and maybe we've gone too far, is to defend like the republic, the idea, the concept of our liberal democracy. Because if you lose people that have faith in the system, then, I mean, what do you have then? You've got authoritarian right people, or you've got populist left people. Like, at the end of the day, there's nobody left to defend the system. Then who cares about the system, right? And I think that's the issue. And I said this before, I think Democrats and progressives especially have a large role in causing people not to trust the system, because if you talk to Democrats, so what's the problem? Well, we don't have single payer healthcare. Why not? Because of corrupt lobbyists and because of billionaires. Oh, okay. How's racism in the United States? Worse than it ever has been ever. We have a white supremacist policing force. Okay. I guess how are we doing, like, economically? Horrible. Income inequality is the highest it's ever been due to the donor class. Okay. Foreign policy wise, horrible. We're supporting a genocide in Gaza, plus insert every South American thing you've ever heard. Okay. Okay, well, fuck. Like, if that's what the left has been portraying the system as being for so long, and then you go to the right, and the right's like, we think the system is we just want to knock it all down and build over. Okay. What are you saying on the left again? Well, actually, the system's okay, guys. We think that we don't know why they're trying to destroy the system. We need to defend the system. It's like, well, you guys have been saying the system's completely for over a decade now. Why the would we defend this? Right. The issue is that you don't have anybody that's actually defending any part of the system. And defending it doesn't mean you're saying it's without errors or that there's nothing that can be fixed or salvaged or nothing that can be changed or modified, even radically modified. But if you have nobody willing to defend the system, it's not surprising when at the end of the day, nobody gives a about checks and balances or what the law says or who can impeach who or what it means to, whatever. So talk the United States of America into spending $350 billion. Okay. To go into a war that couldn't be won. True. Remember when Ukraine was like, let's go into the war? The United States has spent $200 billion more than Europe. Have we even done $200 billion in total aid? I thought the number was still south of $200 billion. I thought it was like 170 or 180 or something. But maybe it's higher than that by now. It could be. Why didn't sleepy Joe Biden demand equalization and that this war is far more important to Europe than it is to us? That's such a horrible statement for the United States. Oof. We don't give a fuck about you guys. On military aid, Europe's support of $62 billion is on a similar level to that of the United States, which has allocated $64 billion. However, Europe has long surpassed the U.S. when it comes to financial and humanitarian aid, which is $70 billion versus $50 billion. Oh, okay. So Europe has contributed more than the United States towards this. Nice. So Europe has actually donated more. Military aid cumulative to Ukraine provided by the U.S. and Europe. So for military stuff, it's about equal. And then for non-military aid, how unbelievable. This is a crime. This line here, this is criminal. Yeah, that too. You're also not, or I'm guessing, you're not counting in here how much money European countries have spent dealing with the refugee fallout as well from Ukraine. What do conservatives give as the reason Ukraine gave up their nuclear arsenal in 1994? They probably just meme through it. I don't know. Ask Sean. Jesus. Over 2% of their GDP given as aid from Estonia, Denmark, Lithuania. That's wild. What would that be for the United States? If we did 2% of our GDP of 29,167 billion times 0.02% would have been $583 billion if we did 2%. This fucking guy. All these countries have interest in Ukraine to win the war, no? All of us have an interest in Ukraine winning the war. Well, in the West we do, including the United States of America. Zelenskyy killed an American journalist. He's referring to Coach Red Pill here.
I would worship the ground they walk on. 210 to 219 years old, 866. From 220 years old to 229 years old, 1,039. And then you have two people, from 240 years old to 249 years old, one person. And there's one person that's 360 years old.
He really just read off that whole tweet, huh?
That's just that. And then, where's the money being spent, right? Let's go into that for just a second.
Oh my God.
$520 million for a consultant on the environment. It's called Environmental, Social, and Governance Investments in Africa, and mobilize private sector resources. $520 million. Somebody got $520 million for an environmental, sounds like an environmental study. That's I've always been one that paid a lot of money for my environmental studies, but I paid like $50,000, not $520 million. $520 million for ESG. $25 million to promote biodiversity, conservation, and promote licit livelihoods by developing socially responsible behavior in the country of Colombia. Well, it's nice, $25 million to go into Colombia for something that nobody ever heard of. $40 million to improve the social and economic inclusion of sedentary migrants. $40 million. $42 million for Johns Hopkins, great place to research and drive social and behavior change in Uganda. $42 million. What about us? What about social change in our country? $70 million for a center at Purdue to research university-sourced, evidence-based solutions to developmental challenges. I mean, these are massive numbers on things that nobody ever heard about. $10 million for Mozambique voluntary medical male circumcisions. $10 million for circumcisions in another country. $9.7 million for UC Berkeley to develop a cohort of Cambodian youth with enterprise-driven skills. In other words, let's teach them something about enterprise. What about our people?
What?
Can we teach them about enterprise? $2.3 million for strengthening independent voices in Cambodia.
He says as he abolishes the Department of Education.
$32 million to the Prague Civil Society Center, which is a very liberal group of people. Wonder how much of that money came back to the people that approved it. $14 million for improving public procurement in Serbia. $486 million to the Consortium for Elections and Political Process Strengthening, including $22 million for inclusive and participatory political process in Moldova, and $21 million for voter turnout in India. Well, why are we giving $21 million to India? They got a lot of money. They're one of the highest taxing countries in the world in terms of us. We can hardly get in there because their tariffs are so high. I have a lot of respect for India. I have a lot of respect for the Prime Minister. He just left, as you know, 2 days ago. But we're giving $21 million for voter turnout. It's voter turnout in India. What about, like, voter turnout here? Oh, we've done that, I guess. We did $500 million, didn't we? It's called the lockboxes. $20 million for fiscal federalism
somebody was trying to talk.
Nepal.
Oh, she just got black-bagged and hauled away.
Listen to these numbers. This is all fraud. $19 million for biodiversity conservation in Nepal. $1.5 million for voter confidence. We want to give them confidence in Liberia. $14 million for social cohesion in Mali. $2.5 million for inclusive democracies in South Africa. $47 million for improving learning outcomes in Asia. Asia's doing very well. They're doing a lot better than we do in the schools, aren't they? $2 million to develop sustainable recycling models to increase socioeconomic cohesion among marginalized communities in Kosovo and Escali and in Egypt. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars. I could, by the way, I could read this all day long. I could go on all day long, and you'll see hundreds of billions of dollars, and we're doing it. But when I saw the social...
Do you think he... Oh my God, I just understood it. Oh my God, I just had a huge fucking click moment. When Joe Rogan was asking Trump, what's it like to actually be president? And Trump couldn't answer that question. He's like, well, the bed that Abraham Lincoln slept in is real big. And then Joe Rogan's like, yeah, but like, how do you like lead the country? He's like, there's a lot of paintings in that Oval Office. Maybe the answer was because Trump doesn't actually know how to be president. Maybe he doesn't know how to do anything. Like, I don't know how to explain or how to convey to you how pathetic it is that Trump is reading off sheets of information that we can see on Twitter. Like, he's the president of the United States. You know that you could request so much more detailed information if you wanted to. There's so much more that you could have about this. But is he just not aware of that? Maybe he doesn't know. Maybe Trump wakes up and he's like, I wonder what's going on in the DOD. I'm going to go on Twitter and find out. Instead of, just like calling his, for DOD, would it be, do you go down to your chiefs of staff or... I need to figure out the structure of this. What is the, does the Secretary of Defense report directly to the president and then the chiefs of staff is a separate thing? Hold on, I forgot. Oh, they're not even... Or is that all just part of the Department of Defense, the Defense Department? But like you can make a phone call and you can get all of this information, bro. Like, when are we Europeans going to stop being scandalized about Donald Trump and start helping him to end this war? Of course, Ukraine didn't start the war. You might as well say that America attacked Japan at Pearl Harbor. Of course, a country undergoing a violent invasion should not be staging elections. There was no general election in the UK from 35 to 45. Of course, Zelensky's ratings are not 4%. They're actually about the same as Trump's. Trump's statements are not intended to be historically accurate, but to shock Europeans into action. In particular, the US can see $300 billion of frozen Russian assets, mainly in Belgium. That is cash that can and should be used to pay Ukraine and compensate the US for its support. Why is Europe preventing that? Then why not just say that? Why not just say unfreeze these funds? Why couldn't you just say that? What? Why would we go so... All of this, I think I've even watched this. All of this is just this. Like, you can't do this forever. Why?
Let's run a quick scenario, okay? I will be the boss, and you will come to me for a raise. Go.
Sir, I was wondering if I could have a raise.
I'm listening.
Well, I've been a top performing salesman at the company for the last 3 years. I'm the first one in it.
Okay, stop. It's done.
Really?
On one condition.
Sure. What's up?
You tell my family I loved it. If I give you this pay raise, it'll come out of my paycheck, which means I won't be able to provide for my family the way I want to. And I can't live with that. So.
I don't want the raise. I don't want the raise. It's fine.
See what I did there, guys? I negotiated with death. DuPont executive approach to higher salaries.
Except unironically, there's like the whole Republican Party every time Trump says anything ever. You know what a fun question would be for conservatives the next time somebody talks to any of them? Is there anything that Trump could say that you would condemn? Like, how much worse could it be than stuff like this? Like, can we even imagine a phrase that Trump could say where they're like, yeah, that's probably over the line? I hate white people. They won't answer. I just got in an argument with a friend over this exact question, and they blocked me without being able to answer. Okay, let's see. We've got perhaps the tiniest, itty-bittiest amount of pushback.
So yesterday, President Trump, in this particular press conference, went extraordinarily hard on Ukraine, much less hard on Russia. Now, you can make the case that pragmatically what he is attempting to do is sort of wheedle Vladimir Putin into coming to the table.
What has he got? How much credit? What have we gotten so far with all of this negotiating power? What have we negotiated? What have we gotten? And people keep saying this. He's using his power. For what have we gotten? Where are these negotiations? Where are they at? Hello?
Basically what he's saying to Vladimir Putin is, listen, I'm not taking an antagonistic position toward you. I share some of your concerns. Let's just get to the end of this thing. That is a positive read. The negative read is that President Trump is getting some of this stuff wrong. And that includes some of the demands that he is now making on Ukraine, which are harsher than the demands that he is currently making on Russia. Now, again, from a pragmatic point of view, perhaps the idea here is that it's harder to bring Russia to the table than it is to bring Ukraine to the table after all.
No shit, Sherlock, but this is why Trump is supposed to be the master negotiator. It's so crazy. When you're talking about Trump during election season, we're in our imaginations, but once Trump has been elected, we're in reality. Why is it like it? Why are you allowed to do that? Why is it like that? It shouldn't be allowed, right? Trump, in election, Trump is like, I can make any deal possible happen. And then Trump, after his elected, is like, fuck, man, this shit is actually kind of fucking hard. Like, eggs are expensive. I can't do shit about that. You're blaming me for inflation? What the fuck am I? I'm the fucking president. Negotiating with Russia? Come on, dude. What am I supposed to do? Damn, you know?
The United States has the ability to cudgel Ukraine. The United States is giving billions and hundreds of billions of dollars in aid. The United States has power over enormous swaths of the European continent. And it's hard to get Russia to come to the table, and so you have to make more consent. Maybe that's the pragmatic concern here. However, negotiating from a position of weakness with regard to Putin is likely to result in a worse deal in the end, unless you think that basically the terms of the deal are already set, and we're all just dancing to the tune until the clock runs out, essentially, at which point everybody knows what happens. There are security guarantees to Ukraine, including money flying to Ukraine, European peacekeepers in the region, Russia keeping Donbass and Crimea. And so here's President Trump saying some stuff about Ukraine. Again, I have some moral objections to the stuff that he is saying about Ukraine here, because I don't think that it is true. So, for example, at one point during this press conference, he made the signally false statement that Ukraine started the war. This is not true. Ukraine absolutely did not start the war. You can argue with Ukrainian policy toward both Europe and Russia over the period 2013 to 2022.
You mean when Russia was occupying part of their territory?
But Russia invaded a sovereign country and tried to take Kyiv and has killed tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people. Here's President Trump suggesting sort of the opposite, that somehow Ukraine is the problem here.
Today I heard, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. But they chose not to do it that way. And President Biden, in all fairness, he doesn't have a clue.
Okay, so President Trump there saying Ukraine never should have started it. Ukraine did not, in fact, start it. You can blame them for not coming to the table sooner. You can say the deal should have been taken sooner. I've said that myself. But Ukraine absolutely did not start the war, and Russia should have stopped this war at any point. President Trump then continued by suggesting that he wants elections in Ukraine. This has been a demand of the Russians, mainly because the Russians wish to intervene in that election. It turns out it's very difficult to hold an election in wartime conditions where literally hundreds of thousands of fighting-age men are still on the front lines in Ukraine. That is a situation rife for election manipulation by the Russians, who, of course, are bordering on Ukraine, and many agents inside Ukraine as well. It is also noteworthy here that if you're going to call for new elections, perhaps Russia at some point should hold, an actual decent election in which Vladimir Putin does not win 98% of the vote while throwing his opponents off third-story buildings. Here's President Trump.
We're hearing that Russia wants to force Ukraine to hold new elections in order to sign any kind of a peace deal. Is that something that the U.S. would ever support?
Well, we have a situation where we haven't had elections in Ukraine, where we have
The Russian talking point.
martial law, essentially martial law in Ukraine,
The Russian talking point.
where the leader in Ukraine, I mean, I hate to say it, but he's down at 4% approval rating.
4%? Is that even possible? Like, even if he was the most unpopular of all time, like, I doubt even Yanukovych was at 4%, but okay, another Russia talking point.
And where a country has been
Someone said he's at 57%.
blown to smithereens. When they want a seat at the table, you could say wouldn't the people of Ukraine have to say, like, it's been a long time since we've had an election? That's not a Russia thing. That's something coming from me and coming from many other countries also.
Wait.
It's been a long time since we've had, when they want a seat at the table, you could say wouldn't the people of Ukraine have to say, like, it's been a long time since we've had an election? That's not a Russia thing. That's something coming from me and coming from many other countries also.
Okay, it is not coming from many other countries. I mean, the reality is, by the way, that Vladimir Zelensky's approval rating, and again, I think Zelensky has botched many things here, including his relationship with President Trump, but his approval rating is at 52%. It is not, in fact, at 4%. The election was due in May of 2024. They are currently under martial law. Again, it is very difficult to hold an election in the middle of a gigantic existential war with your much larger neighbor. And if he's talking about how the people should really sound off on whether or not they like the war, you kind of have to have that on both sides. There needs to be an election in Russia as well. Trump, I think that some of this is just personal pique at Zelensky. I think that President Trump does not like Zelensky's approach to him. He doesn't like Zelensky's approach to Joe Biden. And so he's sounding off about that. And again, I don't disagree with him on how Zelensky's approached both Biden and President Trump. But when he is ripping on Zelensky in the middle of the negotiation, that obviously is going to strengthen whatever hand Vladimir Putin thinks he has to play here. Here's Trump saying that Zelensky is not getting the job done.
How would you counter the perception, because Russia's pushing for this, obviously, they don't really hold true elections, that would be a capitulation of some sort? How would you guard against potentially Russia installing a puppet government? And then finally, how would that new election have an impact on getting Zelensky to sign the rare earth minerals deal?
Look, you have leadership, and I like him personally. He's fine.
But very much. That's okay. It's retarded.
I spoke to you yesterday about normalcy bias, which is a fascinating psychological phenomenon from which I think we all suffer at times, not all the time, of course. I was trying to think what the opposite of normalcy bias is, and it's probably hyperbole. So normalcy bias describes a desire to disbelieve or minimize threat warnings. So you are presented with something that makes you go, oh my God, that's that. And then you automatically, there's some form of psychological self-preservation kicks in and you start, no, it can't be that bad. It can't do that. I don't mean false equivalence. I don't mean BBC-style two-siding facts. Here's Andrea Leadsom to claim that, the moon is made of cheese type of balance. I mean, trying to talk yourself out of thinking, fearing, believing that what you're looking at is apocalyptic. What you're looking at is deadly serious. And of course, I think the opposite of that is hyperbole. Because hyperbole involves saying that something is apocalyptic and something is deadly serious when it isn't. And we have to walk this tightrope together at the moment. I thought perhaps we were putting these days behind us when Keir Starmer got elected. I don't know how naive that was in retrospect, thinking that we're returning to days of relative stability and normality as opposed to normalcy. You're not going to have a barefaced liar in the House of Commons. I mean, abandoned by his entire party, found to have lied repeatedly and then running off with his tail between his legs to the Daily Mail. You just presume there'll be stability. And good God, there is. Thank goodness we have somebody who, though flawed and fallible, is clearly not a pathological liar, for example, or an incurable narcissist in number 10 Downing Street, or Liz Truss. I haven't got the adjective, sorry, sue me. But you cannot for a minute underestimate the import of the moment that we find ourselves in. It's incredible, this. This is not a moment for worrying about hyperbole. This is a moment for worrying about normalcy bias. This is a moment where you have to try to silence the voice in your head that is saying, this is really bloody serious. Now, Donald Trump is lying on a scale that is almost impossible to compute. And he's not just lying. He is the online Kremlin propaganda made flesh. He is repeating the lines that your Auntie Doris's Facebook has been serving up for the last 10 years about...
Maybe I'm missing something, but can't Ukraine and Europe just ignore the U.S.-Russia peace talks, however unlikely it is? Can't Europe just fund the war itself? I mean, they can ignore it, but it's causing these rifts and schisms. And if the U.S. was to pull out completely from funding Ukraine, I don't know if Europe would continue to support them. But I mean, I guess that's part of what the talks are that European leaders are supposed to be having. Have they already had them, or are they scheduling to have them? Or?
About Ukraine being responsible for its own invasion. Remember when Farage spoke about, you don't poke the Russian bear? That pro-Kremlin propaganda has seeped into so many corners now of the online world that it has, well, again with Trump, you don't know whether he is caught up in it or simply harnessing it for his own ends. But he is absolutely, as Sir Ben Wallace said this morning to Nick Ferrari, he is absolutely parroting Kremlin propaganda lines or propaganda lies, whatever you prefer. And that is incredible. That is not a moment for worrying about hyperbole. That the President of the United States of America is peddling Kremlin pro-Putin propaganda. It's extraordinary. Now, it's one of those mornings where I always feel like the kid in The Sixth Sense seeing dead people. I don't see links that don't exist, but I have a few stories that are not immediately, obviously relevant to what we need to talk about this morning. The first involves Elon Musk. Quite briefly, because I think this is important in terms of what people do online, what people see and what people end up believing. Elon Musk reposted an image of what the original poster said was a hospital in Birmingham in the United Kingdom being overrun by migrants storming the premises with axes and knives. The account, which is the kind of thing that Twitter is now almost entirely dedicated to, claimed that the picture had been taken in Birmingham and that the story was buried on mainstream media. That poor woman that I eavesdropped on in Hounslow last week was adamant that the mainstream media never gives you the full story. The woman who believes that Michelle Obama is a man and that Vladimir Zelenskyy spends all the military aid he receives on yachts.
And that Macron's wife is a man too. That's another one. Those trans people are everywhere, apparently.
I can laugh at her, but the President of the United States of America is now signed up to exactly the same feed. So Elon Musk shares this picture, shares this claim. Mainstream media are ignoring it. Would you like to know where the footage came from? That the footage that was being described as migrants wielding axes and knives storming a hospital in Birmingham that had been buried on mainstream media.
Arma 3.
It is widely believed, I mean, it's clearly fake. It appears to be from the Batman film The Dark Knight Rises.
Oh.
So it wasn't Birmingham, it was Gotham City. It wasn't real, it was cinematic. And that's Elon Musk, arguably the second most powerful man in the world at the moment. Certainly the richest. Using his own propaganda machine to tell you and anybody else on that site that Birmingham hospitals are being overrun by migrants wielding knives and axes. How many people believe it? With that woman I overheard in Hounslow last week when I was on jury service, does she believe it? I suspect she probably does.
Wait, does anybody have a link to this
tweet? And then you
tweet?
come to the Romanian election, which is something we should probably all be reading up on rather more because it's almost the distillation of a lot of the problems that we face. So the last Romanian election was annulled because when the results started coming in, two people, a chap called Salin Georgescu and a woman called Elena Lasconi were performing incredibly well, despite the fact that certainly in the first case, nobody had ever heard of them prior to the election. And this is where things get really tricky, because it was the Constitutional Court that annulled the first round results, citing Article 50, Paragraph 3 of Romania's electoral law, which allows for annulment if significant fraud or interference likely impacts the election's outcome. And what they discovered was a slate of coordinated misinformation campaigns on social media. But of course, this was done secretly, Russian-sponsored. What Elon Musk is doing now is, shrugging off any semblance of secrecy. Sharing it, and they do what Farage did after he used Andrew Tate as his news source prior to last summer's riots. They say, just asking questions, what's going on here? Not doing the most cursory of checks to see whether this stuff is true, but spread.
Wait, what? Okay. The original response was deleted. What happened here? Nothing happened. All the pictures and videos referred to in the post were confirmed as fake. No disorder took place at any hospital in Birmingham following the death of a 16-year-old boy. Images being shared on social media which claim to show people carrying weapons at a hospital are fake. Several X users were quick to flag that the image was actually a screenshot from The Dark Knight Rises, the 2012 Christopher Nolan Batman film. Base. Birmingham.
Spreading misinformation on a hideous level, social media, cyber attacks, influencing public opinion in Georgescu's favour. So I've seen him described as a TikTok puppet, with the Kremlin pulling all of the strings, but pulling them so effectively on TikTok, with people primed to believe things that aren't true, that they end up voting for him. The investigation, which of course is why a certain type of pundit and politician likes nothing more than attacking judges, because judges are in some ways our last line of defence against dictators and fascists, against oppression. That is why courts decide to annul an election because a foreign state has clearly targeted them. They wanted a pro-Kremlin candidate or even a pro-Kremlin proxy in charge or in the Romanian presidency. It's not clear-cut for me, this. That's probably the single greatest flaw with democracy, is that people who believe something that isn't true can win. Who just thought of Brexit? So you say, Democrat, it's the will of the people, but it's the will of people who've been fed a diet of undiluted nonsense and lies. But democracy is the best system we've got. How we cope with democracy's vulnerability to the fact that you can have a win for liars You can have a majority of people who believe things that aren't true. I do not know, because I don't think it's ethically or even politically clean cut that the Constitutional Court in Romania should have annulled this election, that this, quote, will of the people. So we pull that together. We have the events in Ukraine unfolding. We have the events in Romania. We have the events online. We have all of these things unfolding in real time in front of us. And then you have Donald Trump overnight making it absolutely clear what his relationship with observable facts is, what his relationship with the truth is. And this is why I began this morning by talking about normalcy bias and hyperbole. Normalcy bias is a cognitive bias which leads us to believe things that aren't true because we're frightened of them being true, to disbelieve or minimize threat warnings. Hyperbole is a device we deploy best understood as exaggeration. So here is somebody saying something, oh my God, that's like Hitler. Sounds like hyperbole until it is like Hitler. And when it is like Hitler, normalcy bias kicks in and we start trying to talk ourselves out of that grim conclusion. So just listen to it for yourself and possibly register what kicks in first. Fear of hyperbole or fear of normalcy bias?
I want to see peace. Look, you know why I want? Because I don't want all these people killed anymore. I'm looking at people that are being killed. And they're Russian and Ukrainian people, but they're people. Doesn't matter where they're from on the whole planet. And I think I have the power to end this war. And I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited. Well, you've been there for 3 years. You should have ended it 3 years. You should have never started it. You could have made a deal. I could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land, everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down. This could have been settled very easily. Just a half-baked negotiator could have settled this years ago. When they're worried about not being seated, you mean somebody that should have gone in and made a deal a long time ago. You could have made a deal. This is one that could have made a deal. There was no talk of this during the Trump administration. Putin would have never, ever done it.
10:15 is the time. So there it is. Donald Trump has blamed Ukraine for being invaded by Russia twice. Donald Trump has claimed that Volodymyr Zelenskyy is somehow responsible for the continuing carnage that has come about as a consequence of him defending his sovereign territory from the rapacious, imperial, murderous ambition of Vladimir Putin. It's incredible. So what question do we ask this morning? I mean, there's one in the back of my mind that I am frightened to articulate. The other element of domestic politics that pops into my brain at this moment is the mockery of Kemi Badenoch. But she has clearly calculated that appealing to this radicalized online right who believe all manner of lies is going to deliver political success for her in the way that it has done for Donald Trump and may yet do for other far-right, avowedly far-right political movements in other European countries. When Americans tell lies about Britain, often racist lies about Britain, it's designed to scare the horses. It's to make people think, gosh, Donald Trump can protect us. We won't end up like this, even if it's not true, the thing that they're frightened of. They do it about their own country, but about foreigners in their own country. They're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. And I will protect you from these marauding hordes, these foreigners. Look at what's happened in Europe. What I don't understand is how anybody who is living in Europe can join in. It is arguably the least patriotic act imaginable when a foreign politician tells lies about your country to agree. So when Kemi Badenoch talks about Western values being imperiled, disappearing under threat. Maybe she's a member of the radicalized online right. Maybe she believes all this stuff. Spends so long on social media that she can't even find the time to stick her head out of the window and just have a little look around. But that is where we are now. And the question I don't want to ask you is whether or not it's already too late. Whether or not Vladimir Putin has actually won. And Ukraine is just the final piece of the evidence jigsaw. Because for the President of the United States, expressing disappointment that the Ukrainian leader was unhappy about being left out of talks between the US and Russia over the ending of the war in his own country, when he talks about Ukraine's ability to have made a deal in order to have somehow averted war in the very beginning, when he essentially repeats Kremlin lies about the necessity and inevitability of invading, you kind of think that it's, for one part of this board, if it were a game of Risk, that's over now. The Kremlin and the White House are aligned. And yet Ukraine was a moment of, I'm going to say, political beauty in this country. I know that there are caveats, but forget the caveats just for a minute. The effort that the people of this country, the citizenry of this country, put into helping refugees, even when the government didn't really step up to the plate very effectively, ordinary people did. Like the kinder transport, the government, history doesn't often relate this, but the government was pretty delinquent when it came to helping Jewish children out of Nazi-occupied Europe. But real people, families, stepped up to the plate, made financial pledges and housed and homed people. And the Ukrainian refugee exodus was, I think, possibly the biggest we've ever undertaken in this country. People listening to this program from Ukraine, still living here. People listening to this program still got refugees living in their house from Ukraine. Everyone agreed. It was a moment of political unity at a time when we thought such a thing had become impossible in the aftermath of Brexit, in the midst of ludicrous confected culture wars, in the dog days of footballification. Ukraine was the thing we all agreed on. Putin is a menace. Ukraine deserves support. And now the President of the United States, historically our greatest ally, is saying the polar opposite. It's all Zelensky's fault, and he's got no right to be at the peace talks. Is it? You never stop fighting. You can't stop fighting. You can't look into the eyes of people like Marina Litvinenko or Vladimir Kara-Murza or Yulia Navalny, as I have done in the last 6 months, all three of them. You can't look into the eyes of those people and say, we need to stop now. We need to give up. But this is, I think, a victory for the Kremlin on a scale that we can't even begin to properly process.
Yep.
So what hell do I ask you at 20 past 10 on a Wednesday morning? I genuinely don't know. I know I say that a lot of mornings. My normalcy bias is preventing me from asking you whether or not it's too late. So if I ask you whether it's too late, it opens the door to the possibility that you tell me that it is. And I don't want to do that because of my normalcy bias. But I said at 10 o'clock, today's a day for ignoring the normalcy bias. You have to. You have to drown that voice out. Champagne corks are popping in the Kremlin, said my good friend Bill Browder, who knows more.
We're going to be playing in Factorio. This is I keep saying this is my number one fear, but there's like so many number one fears. What's going to happen when, because right now the way that this is kind of being sold to us by like outer perimeter conservatives is that, well, we're gearing up for conflict with China. Okay. Russia's not our main enemy. China's our enemy. This is the China that Trump's talking about forever. What's going to happen when China rolls up on Taiwan and now we get excuses for why we're not supposed to do anything there? Then what was the point of anything? What are we actually doing? Yeah, I don't know. Do you think someone like Asmongold, with all of his libertarian-esque ideals, gives any kind of shit about Trump saying he's the only law definer? Or is he going to grift to the end? Asmongold is not a libertarian. I don't know. Nobody very few people who say they're libertarians are libertarians. Usually when they say libertarian, that's just like code speak for, I hate the government, basically.
It's not great, to put a nicer spin on it. Trump tends to talk that way to his friends. Yeah. And tends to talk nicer to his enemies. So if he's talking to you that way, it still means you're his friend. I might, and I would always, of course, warn people like Zelenskyy, just don't get into it with Donald Trump. Don't get into it. What's the point? What's the point? We've been backing you this whole time. We will continue to back you. But there must be a paradigm shift. And that's what President Trump brings to the table here, is a paradigm shift. That's what they're attempting to do. It's not great, to put a nicer spin on it. Trump, I might.
Does that mean I'm Trump's friend? Liz Cheney is Trump's friend too? How do I unfriend him then? I keep trying.
Here is something that the political establishment and propaganda media don't want you to know. Ukraine's President Zelenskyy has just banned yet another political opposition party, one that questioned his legitimacy as president, and used Ukraine's Department of Justice to mandate the seizure of this party's members' assets. Now, this is just the latest of Zelensky's actions to
name, reason, anything in particular. Or we're just okay. That's cool. We're just doing straight Russian propaganda now from the U.S. Department of Intelligence. That's good. Okay.
to do this sort of thing. He began banning major political opposition parties in 2022, when he also started banning TV channels that were associated with his political opponents. And he took over total control of Ukraine's largest television networks, now controlled by their government. Now, Zelensky's presidential term ended on May 20th.
But he hasn't held elections. Somebody said, Destiny, these people need to stop resigning in force of firing after speaking out publicly from their position. This increases their unemployment compensation opportunities anyway and also creates more awareness. No, somebody said this, and I think I agree with it. The reason why you resign from your position is because if you don't, you could just be shuffled around in a way that is far less dramatic and doesn't have as much of the spotlight. So, for instance, rather than like the head of a department resigning or the head of a senior position in a department resigning, you could get demoted and somebody could also be brought in, and then you could be moved to kind of more paper pushing, and then 2 years later you could be fired and it's like nobody cares at that point. There's not as much of a statement. I understand for the resignation. The resignation allows you to resign now in protest of a particular action and with the position that you're in to show the importance of your resignation, rather than this guy's resigning who was the prosecutor head or the head of this department or whatever like 2 years ago. It's probably more impactful to do your resignations this way, I think. Yeah.
He canceled elections in the name of martial law, suspending Ukraine's constitution so that he could stay in power. Now, defenders of Zelenskyy will say, hey, Ukraine is in the middle of a war. They can't have elections. Just stop for a moment and think, if we accept that excuse or criteria for suspending the constitution and canceling elections, now, defenders of Zelenskyy will say, hey, Ukraine is in the middle of a war. They can't have elections. Just stop for a moment and think, if we accept that excuse or criteria for suspending the Constitution and canceling elections, then we should presume that leaders in our own country and our own establishment media will also use this same excuse and rationale when they suspend our Constitution and our elections, since we too are at war with Russia and China.
Okay.
You think this sounds crazy? Look at what's already going on. They've already started conditioning us to accept a dictatorship by rationalizing their own use.
Their own use. Is it going to be COVID lockdowns and weaponizing the DOJ against Trump, maybe? I'm trying to think of what she's going to go with.
Of our Department of Justice to target President Trump
There's that.
and other political enemies.
Do COVID lockdowns. You got 9 seconds. Just get COVID lockdowns in there. Come on, COVID lockdowns.
In their efforts to stay in power.
Ah, fuck. She's not going to. And then there's also this, because remember, Trump can say no wrong, and we're supposed to treat it all as a joke or a meme. But like, are we not like, so long live the king from the White House? Yeah, imagine if Obama posted this. True.
Lastly, we have another executive order that President Trump signed relating to independent agencies. This executive order would establish important oversight functions in the Office of Management and Budget and its subsidiary office, OIRA, supervising independent agencies and many of their actions, and also reestablishes the longstanding norm that only the President or the Attorney General can speak for the United States when stating an opinion as to what the law is.
That is a very, very, very funny statement to make. I don't know. I doubt it's intentional. Or maybe it is. I don't know. But I'm so curious. I want to read these Supreme Court decisions so much because that statement absolutely flies in the face of the... what was the name of the Supreme Court case that overturned Chevron? Chevron overturned Supreme Court. Was it Loper? Oh, maybe I wasn't taking notes yet when we read that one. This gets into weird constitutional law. Okay, to give a quick refresher for anybody that gives a fuck. What the Chevron doctrine said essentially was, let's say Congress passes a law, and Congress passes a law saying we're going to pass a law giving the federal government, the executive branch, the right to regulate, the EPA, to regulate carbon dioxide out of the air. Okay. When the federal government gets that, maybe it can be read in such a way that's like, okay, well, the air, does the air count as the air inside the buildings as well? Or does air just mean like outside when it said in the air? Like, does the EPA have the right to regulate levels in your house? Well, there was this doctrine called the Chevron doctrine. Actually, I think it should be listed in here. And it was called the two-step approach. Basically, what it said was, the first question is, did Congress tell you exactly what to do? And so, did Congress specify? Did they mean air inside the house and outside the house or not? Well, Congress didn't specify. So that was the first step. Okay. And then, now if Congress did say, then you have to do what Congress says. Okay. But then in the case which the statute was silent or ambiguous with respect to the specific issue, Then there was a second step, and the second step was, as long as the government offered a permissible construction of the statute. So let's say the government looks at it and they're like, okay, well, when the EPA gives us the ability to regulate the air, they obviously didn't mean inside people's homes. That'd be like kind of goofy. So we're going to say that for the purposes of how we're going to interpret this statute, we're going to say that the air is just the stuff outside the homes, okay? And that was the reading of the law, okay? So this was the Chevron two-step doctrine, all right? Now, the issue that the Supreme Court had with this is, generally, when you're trying to interpret what a law means, or when you're trying to interpret what is the law? What is the law? That is the exclusive providence of the courts. And so the Supreme Court is looking at this and like, excuse me, if you read Gorsuch's concurrence in this especially, the Supreme Court's looking at this and go, excuse me, statutory interpretation, meaning how do we divine like what is the law that's being said here, right? Or constructing federal rules from Congress. That's not a thing that you guys are just allowed to do and have the final say on. This is ultimately in the purview of the courts. It's not enough to say that there are permissible constructions of rules from statutes. In fact, it is the case that there is only one permissible construction, and it's what the court says that permissible construction is. So the Chevron, this Loper case and getting rid of Chevron, even though people get mad because they like Chevron for whatever reasons, this was actually taking power, maybe a little bit of power away from Congress, quite a bit of power away from the executive, and giving more power to the judiciary. It was the Supreme Court reasserting and saying, we are the last say on what the law is. That was the big deal with this Loper case. Or I say big deal, but this is what overturned Chevron. So it's interesting, the language used here. Now, maybe it's just, they just use whatever words because whatever the fuck, and it's not like, and I'm thinking too like legalese or whatever, but
can speak for the United States when stating an opinion as to that only the president or the attorney general can speak for the United States when stating an opinion as to what the law is.
Thank you very much.
So that flies in the face of Loper. It's Loper, right? That's how you pronounce it. I feel like Democrats weren't very happy about them overturning Chevron, but this feels like a good thing given Trump's executive. Honest to God, I see Chevron going both ways. I don't really think it's as big of a deal as people said it was. I wonder if I said it was a huge deal. I feel like it just wasn't that big of a deal. Like, I think that there's a strong argument that if Congress wants something regulated better, then Congress can write a more specific law, which they've done. We saw that happen. Remember when I debated, I'm going to call him P.F. Chang, but that's the fucking Asian restaurant. Oh, P.F. Young.
Like I said, this is
when I debated P.F. Young over there was a video that we watched with Vivek and Lex. And, oh no, was it Vivek? I think it was Vivek. And Vivek was talking about how the federal government banned cooking classes because they wanted to get rid of weapons in school or whatever, right? Well, when we actually saw why the federal government was pulling funding from schools that were offering cooking classes, it's because Congress passed a law that said any class at all that has you teaching how to use anything that is a weapon, and then that was defined statutorily somewhere else, you're not allowed to fund that. And Congress read it, and the statute included like all sharp objects. It's like, okay, well, fuck, that's what we got to ban. Sorry, that's what Congress said. But once Congress saw that, now a bunch of them virtue signaled, and they were like, oh, we can't believe that the government's doing this. It's horrible. What they did was Congress passed an amendment to that law, and they said, we're going to make an exception in the cases of like cooking classes and archery or whatever else, right? Oh, okay. So in an ideal world, like that's probably okay, right? Congress passed a law. It was a little bit vague. The executive branch interpreted it one way, and then Congress didn't like that. So then Congress passed like an updated amendment to change the way that the federal government was going to enforce it. So like that was fine. It might have been archery classes, but it included like cooking classes and shit as well. So couldn't the agency just dispute to SCOTUS when they disagree with the DOJ? So this EO has no effect. I don't know what you mean, agency. I don't know how an agency can disagree with the DOJ. I don't know. This would be a good PISCO question. I don't know where we're at. I need other lawyers too. We need more than just Pisco as a lawyer. I don't know how the executive branch is supposed to resolve disagreements inside of itself. I don't know if this is a question historically that's asked very much. Yeah, I don't know. Because the issue is that, like, when it comes to legal enforcement, right? Like, if you're disputing like an employment thing, there's processes for that. That's an easy thing. But if you want to like take legal action against somebody in the executive branch, it's hard because the executive branch is the branch that takes legal action, right? Remember, theoretically, there's a world where the executive branch is really all just, helping the president do his job. Well, how would you sue yourself is kind of what you're asking a little bit. Now, I mean, I guess it's already kind of happening, I guess. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. Yeah, it's weird. Like, the head of the agency would have to get external representation and sue the federal government. Yeah, but it's a very weird. I mean, no, I guess because these are all civil cases, so maybe it's not that weird, but it's kind of weird. It's just very strange. Yeah. One thing that I keep showing up, or that I keep seeing that shows up over and over again, that you guys shouldn't get scared about, and everybody's getting scared about this. I keep seeing this. Fuck, I should save Reddit threads that I see on my phone. A court refused a TRO that would have, I think, limited Doge's ability to cut jobs or something. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? Hold on. Let me see if did I save this on my account? You should read Chevron. I think we did back when we covered Loper, I think. Oh yeah, it was this. Judge denies Democrat-led effort to block Doge access.
Hourly Amazon
Jesus. Citing lack of proven harm. Okay. So we've done enough legalese on this stream now. We can kind of understand it, okay? This headline is pretty doomer, okay? So the Democrats were trying to block Doge we're trying to block Doge access to systems, and they couldn't even prove, according to the judge list, they couldn't even prove that there was harm there. And it sounds like the judge denied the Democrats the ability to do this, right? However, what the judge denied here was a temporary restraining order. You have to understand, TROs are they're very, 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 very difficult to get, because a TRO is basically asking, remember, judges are not supposed to rule on fact. All judges do is facilitate the procedural order of things and then make rules-based decisions. They're not there to determine whether or not one side is innocent or guilty, or who's lying, who's not. That's not in the purview of a judge's job. That's what a jury is supposed to do, or a judge in a bench trial. Somebody brings it up on IP banning you. Or not a bench trial. Is it a bench trial when the judge sits instead of a jury? When you're getting a temporary restraining order, you're asking the judge to already take preemptive measures on the merit of what you're filing. You're asking the judge to say, listen, I know that you ordinarily don't decide who wins or loses, but I want you to look at this for real. Do you think I have a good chance of winning? And if the judge looks at it and the judge is like, ooh, there's a pretty good chance of you succeeding on the merits. And there's two parts to this. It's not just one. It's not just that you'll win. And if the court doesn't take preemptive action to enjoin the actions of the defendants in the case, then the plaintiffs will suffer irreparable harm that cannot be remedied in any other course after a trial. So for a TRO to be granted, that's two different things that have to be met. There's a very, very, very high threshold. It's very rare to meet these. That's why it was so exceptional when it was met in some of the other cases. So the fact that it got turned down here doesn't speak at all to well, does that mean that this whole case is bullshit, or that they're never going to that they're never going to succeed or that they can't even prove any harm. No. It's that they couldn't prove irreparable harm would occur if the judge didn't, in a preliminary fashion, block or enjoin, meaning to stop the defendants from doing some action. That's what this means. So when you see headlines like this, this is written in a antagonizing manner. It's not technically true, right? I think she had issue with how broad of restrictions they wanted, and they weren't specific about what harms or something. Sure, and that could be an issue. You're, what am I thinking? I'm thinking the term narrowly tailored, but that has to do with standard of review cases. It wouldn't be, but I don't know if I don't want to use the phrase narrowly tailored because that implies something else, I think. But what you're asking for has to be very limited in terms of like, these are the exact things. Like you couldn't enjoin them from doing everything, right? Like I want to TRO against this guy for breathing because I think that he might like be mean to me or whatever. Like you have to be quite specific, I think. Destiny, I don't know. I feel like the threshold for this should be met when some random guy who's not in any official position is firing employees of the government. No. Are you going to rehire every single one of them after? Well, it depends on what they were asking for here. Keep in mind that you're in like a weird world too legally where, because Trump has actually been a little bit more careful in talking about this, Doge isn't actually firing anybody. It's Trump that's firing them with Doge's recommendation. Now, even that's not technically legal, but what could happen is Doge, like this would be legal. Doge makes a recommendation to the president. The president makes that recommendation to his executive head or his department head, and then the head carries out those firings. That would technically be a legal process. Now, is that actually happening? In some cases, it doesn't seem to be the case. That's why you've got people who are resigning and stuff. But in other cases, it could be the case. Yeah, if that makes sense. Does lack of proven harm potentially mean that there hasn't been tangible harm yet to be seen? No. For a TRO, it's not just harm, it's irreparable harm. Meaning, I can't even think of an example. Let's say somebody is suing somebody and a person is like mining stone out of a quarry and they're taking like 100 blocks of stone a day and the quarry is like 1 billion blocks. Like maybe a judge doesn't do a TRO here because the judge is like, listen, you're probably going to win this case and we do even agree that they're harming you, but like if you win, you can just ask for it all back. It's not a big deal, right? It's not like we have to come in and block them beforehand. You know, it has to be irreparable harm for a TRO, I believe. Do you think there's a world where the courts are just too slow to deal with this full muzzle velocity attempt to break and take over our government? So, oh man, these are two things. I don't know what has to happen or who you guys have to email, but I need people to talk about these two things. I need these to be more proliferated in the media. The first is my checks and balances take, that the checks and balances don't work when the executive doesn't want to play ball. There are no checks and balances at that point. Just to be clear, checks and balances are still assuming everybody's playing by the rules, number one. The second take is, does anybody have a link to to the interview on, was it the BBC with the ICJ ex-president head? Does anybody know what I'm talking about? She has a really good explanation here that more people needed to understand internationally when it came to the ICJ in Israel and when people are talking about domestic cases right now in the United States of America, okay? Courts are not meant to save you. Courts are not meant to save you. That's what the executive is for, okay? If somebody's trying to break in your house, you do not call the court to help you, all right? If somebody is stealing from you, you don't call the court to keep them from stealing from you. If somebody's going to come and kill you, you don't call the court. You might call the court to try to get like a temporary restraining order, which is an exceptional thing, but it's ultimately the executive that comes to save you. Right now, people in the United States of America, they're looking for the courts to save us from the overreach of the executive. But the issue is that a court is just there to make you whole, generally, after somebody's already done a bad thing. That's why a temporary restraining order, which you get into, you can file for and hopefully get a preliminary injunction. These are exceptional things. These aren't the norm. These are exceptional. Preliminary injunctions, temporary restraining orders, and even stays are, maybe not as much to say, but the TROs and the preliminary injunctions, these are exceptional measures that a court is taking against an alleged offender, against an alleged, not alleged, a defendant. So people that are looking for the courts to stop the executive from doing all their bad things, that's scary because it's an improper, in my opinion, it's an improper desire or hope to utilize the court in an active, preventative manner when that's not really what courts are designed to do. So people are going to get mad that maybe the courts aren't moving fast enough. Like they're trying to get on a preliminary injunction. It'll always be like an expedited hearing record, I think, because they want to get those done real quick. But like people might be mad that the courts aren't fast enough. The courts aren't serious. The courts can't really save you. That's not even really their job. That's just a thing to keep in mind. And I wish more people would remember this. The court can't save you, and checks and balances only exist insofar as everybody's willing to play by the rules. Can U.S. politics rebound without an unhinged arc from the left to restore order, or is civility politics dead? I've seen more left-centric conspiracies, but I can't tell if it's just Russia astroturfing. It's probably both, but there is a serious problem right now in the United States in how many people are supporting the actions right now of the Conservative Party. So who is the one that should be doing the saving then? I mean, what should be happening is the executive should never act in a manner where they think they're the sole determiners of law. That's what should be happening. But if the executive decides that they can't do that, or they don't want to do that, then ideally, at the very least, you force them to be more open about it, meaning they lose all support from Congress. But the problem right now is that we don't just have, this is the problem too. We don't just have an unhinged executive, and we don't just have an unhinged Congress, and by Congress I mean Republicans. We have an unhinged Republican voter base, because if Congress wanted, like, this would be a really easy thing. Let's assume that Trump and his admin, let's say that Trump and the Trump administration, those are the only crazy people. If that was the case, oh, that's easy. Then we impeach him in Congress. Boom. Let's say that we impeach him. Oh, but he doesn't leave. Okay, fuck. Then the military goes and removes him. Whatever. That's easy at that point. If all of Congress and the American people are supporting Congress and they impeach Trump and Trump doesn't leave office, then fuck it. Then the military goes in or whatever. But the issue is that the Republicans in Congress aren't moving to do that because the American people seem to be supporting Trump still. So the people keep asking sometimes, this is actually a criticism I gave, I think multiple years ago. People keep saying, how do we change the system right now? Because the system seems to be broken. And I've said this over and over again. The system's not broken. It's just accurately representing the will of the American people. And the will of the American people right now, prior to this, was very divided. And now it's like authoritarian, right? People always assume, and I guess we're seeing it more and more in the book that we're reading for the rise and the coming of the Third Reich, the first part of the trilogy. The issue is that if half your country wants an authoritarian leader, there's no system that you can install. There's no system that you can design to prevent that from happening, you know? I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure the founders intended for Congress to go against the will of the people in times like this. I think that was the original intention of the Electoral College, to provide a safeguard against an incompetent leader being voted in. Nah, the Electoral College has nothing to do with Congress. I only read like 26 of the Federalist Papers. Maybe we'll go back to reading more of them. But I don't know if Congress ever is supposed to go against the will of the people. You could argue that electors, when they vote for president, were supposed to be doing it in a different manner, but we're past that. That's not our issue right now. Why does the executive get the power of the veto? Does it not imply the ultimate legislative role? It's just to create a lot of gridlock. It's just to ensure that if legislation passed in our system, that there is a huge consent of the people in all ways for it to pass, basically.